Marcus Chun had been working the night shift at the Texaco station on Highway 47 for 3 years, and he thought he'd seen everything. Drunk drivers, runaway teenagers, and the occasional trucker who hadn't slept in 36 hours. But nothing had prepared him for what stumbled out of the darkness at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. The thing that approached his gas station was enormous, easily the size of a city bus, but it moved with the fluid grace of a cat despite its obvious exhaustion. Scales that shimmered like oil on water caught the harsh fluorescent lights, and wings that could have covered a basketball court dragged behind it like broken umbrellas. It was a dragon, honest to God, straight out of every fantasy novel Marcus had ever read as a kid. The dragon's breathing was labored, great puffs of steam rising from its nostrils in the cool night air. Its magnificent head hung low, almost touching the cracked asphalt of the station's parking lot. When it looked up at Marcus through the reinforced glass of the service window, its eyes held an intelligence that made his skin crawl and his heart race at the same time. Marcus stood frozen behind the counter, his hand halfway to the silent alarm button. The dragon's gaze followed his movement, and somehow, impossibly, it shook its head. A gesture so human that Marcus felt his rational mind trying to reject what he was seeing. The creature approached the service window slowly, each footstep making the building vibrate slightly. Up close, Marcus could see the intricate patterns of its scales, the way they shifted from deep emerald to brilliant gold, depending on how the light hit them. But he could also see the exhaustion etched into every line of the dragon's massive frame. This was a being that had traveled far and was running on empty. The dragon's head lowered until it was level with the service window. Its eyes, each one larger than Marcus's fist, fixed on his face. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder, felt as much as heard. "Human," the dragon said, and Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin. The voice was ancient, carrying the weight of centuries, but there was something else there too. Desperation. "I require assistance." Marcus found his voice after what felt like an eternity. What kind of assistance? The dragon's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that reminded Marcus absurdly of his sister's golden retriever when it was confused. "Fuel," the dragon said simply. "I have traveled far, and my reserves are depleted. I observed your establishment and noted the presence of refined petroleum products. I require sustenance to continue my journey." "You want gas?" Marcus asked, still not quite believing this conversation was happening. "If that is what you call it, yes." The dragon's eyes never left Marcus's face. "I can compensate you appropriately for your assistance." Marcus looked around the empty station, then back at the massive creature outside. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this wasn't possible, that he was having some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But the dragon was there, solid and real, waiting patiently for his response. How much do you need?" Marcus heard himself ask. The dragon considered this for a moment. "Your largest dispensing capacity would be sufficient for immediate needs." Marcus looked at the pump readings. The station could dispense up to 50 gallons at a time before needing to be reset. 50 gallons? That's going to be expensive. Something that might have been amusement flickered in the dragon's ancient eyes. "Cost is not a concern." One massive claw reached into what Marcus only then realized was a small pouch hung around the creature's neck. When the claw withdrew, it held something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was a gemstone, but calling it simply a gemstone was like calling the ocean a puddle. The thing was the size of a softball, perfectly cut, and it seemed to contain its own light source. Colors shifted and danced within its crystalline structure, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Will this suffice?" the dragon asked, placing the gem carefully on the narrow ledge outside the service window. Marcus stared at the stone, trying to process what he was seeing. Even if it was glass, the craftsmanship alone would make it worth thousands. But something told him this wasn't glass. This was something far more valuable than anything he'd ever seen. That's way too much," he managed to say. The dragon blinked slowly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both surprise and approval. You are honest. This is unexpected. Most beings would accept payment far exceeding the value of services rendered. Where I come from, we call that stealing, Marcus said, surprising himself with his boldness. The dragon studied him with renewed interest. Fascinating. You possess integrity despite being in a position where deception would benefit you greatly. It paused, seeming to come to some decision. Very well, human. I will accept your assistance, and we shall determine appropriate compensation afterward. Marcus nodded, still feeling like he was dreaming. Okay, but I gotta ask, how exactly do you consume gasoline? The same way your machines do, though far more efficiently. The dragon straightened to its full height. I will position myself near your dispensing apparatus. Marcus watched through the window as the creature moved toward pump number 3, its movements surprisingly graceful despite its size. He activated the pump from inside, setting it to dispense the full 50 gallons, then stepped outside to watch what happened next. The dragon lowered its head to the pump nozzle, and Marcus saw something that made him question everything he thought he knew about biology. The creature's mouth opened slightly, revealing not just teeth, but what looked like complex mechanical structures integrated into its jaw. When it clamped down on the nozzle, there was a soft click, like a connection being made. You can start the flow, the dragon said, its voice slightly muffled. Marcus squeezed the handle, and gasoline began flowing into the dragon's mouth. But instead of the choking or poisoning he expected, the creature's eyes brightened noticeably, and some of the exhaustion seemed to lift from its frame. The scales along its neck began to glow softly, pulsing in rhythm with what Marcus realized must be the creature's heartbeat. As the fuel flowed, Marcus found his curiosity overcoming his fear. "Where are you from?" he asked. The dragon's eyes shifted to look at him without moving its head. When it spoke, its voice carried clearly despite the nozzle in its mouth. "Far from here. Another system entirely." "System? You mean like solar system?" "Correct, though the term solar is imprecise. My home orbits a blue giant star, not a yellow dwarf like yours." Marcus felt his worldview shifting with each word. "You're an alien, as are you from my perspective." The dragon's eyes crinkled slightly, which Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement, though I suspect your definition of the term carries different connotations. The pump clicked off, having dispensed its full capacity. The dragon lifted its head from the nozzle, and Marcus could see that the glow along its neck had intensified. The creature looked visibly refreshed, like a car that had just been filled with premium fuel. "Better?" Marcus asked. "Significantly." The dragon stretched its wings slightly, and Marcus heard the subtle sound of mechanisms whirring. "Your fuel is remarkably efficient, much more so than I anticipated. What did you expect? Something far more primitive. Your species has only recently achieved spaceflight, and your technology appears relatively basic from an external perspective. I did not expect to find fuel of such quality." Marcus bristled slightly at the casual dismissal of human achievement. "Hey, we might not be as advanced as you, but we're not primitive." The dragon tilted its head again, studying Marcus with what seemed like genuine interest. "You defend your species despite knowing how limited your advancement is compared to mine? Someone's got to." Marcus surprised himself again with his boldness. "And honestly, if you're so advanced, what are you doing buying gas at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere?" For the first time since the encounter began, the dragon looked uncomfortable. Its great head lowered slightly, and when it spoke, there was something almost vulnerable in its voice. "I am between destinations," it said carefully. "My usual sources of fuel are temporarily unavailable to me." "Temporarily unavailable," Marcus repeated. "That sounds like a polite way of saying you're in trouble." The dragon's eyes flashed, but not with anger, with something that looked almost like respect. "You are perceptive for such a young species." "We might be young, but we're not stupid." Marcus leaned against the pump, crossing his arms. "So what kind of trouble are we talking about here?" The dragon was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could almost see it weighing its options. Finally, it seemed to come to a decision. "I'm being pursued," the dragon said simply, "by others of my kind who disagree with certain choices I have made." What kind of choices? The kind that led me to seek fuel at a primitive gas station rather than from proper supply depots. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They're coming here? Eventually. I had hoped to be gone before they tracked me this far, but my fuel reserves were lower than anticipated. The dragon looked up at the stars, barely visible through the light pollution. They will follow my ion trail here eventually. Oh, eventually. Days, perhaps a week at most. Marcus stared at the creature, processing what he'd just heard. Aliens were real. They were coming to his gas station, and they apparently weren't friendly. Any sane person would run screaming into the night. Instead, Marcus found himself asking, "What did you do that got them so angry?" The dragon looked down at him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something that might have been hope in those ancient eyes. "I discovered something they wish to remain hidden," the dragon said quietly. "Something about your species that changes everything we thought we knew. About humans? What could you possibly discover about us that would be so important?" The dragon lowered its massive head until it was only a few feet from Marcus. When it spoke, its voice was barely above a whisper, but each word hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Your species possesses a capability that exists nowhere else in the known galaxy," the dragon said. "A capability so unique and so powerful that knowledge of it would reshape the galactic order." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. What capability? The dragon's eyes seemed to look right through him, as if seeing something Marcus couldn't perceive. The ability to adapt and overcome any obstacle through pure determination and creativity. Other species develop technology to solve problems. Humans develop solutions that transcend technology entirely. "I don't understand." "No," the dragon said softly. "You wouldn't. It's so fundamental to your nature that you cannot see it. But to those of us who have observed the galaxy for millennia, it is unmistakable. Humans don't just solve problems. They redefine what problems are." Marcus shook his head. "You're talking about stuff that sounds like science fiction. To you, perhaps. But I have seen your species' brief history among the stars. In less than a century of spaceflight, you have accomplished things that took other species millennia to achieve. And you did it not through superior technology, but through approaches that never occurred to anyone else." The dragon paused, seeming to gather its thoughts. "There is a reason my kind fears this knowledge becoming public," it continued. "For thousands of years, we have maintained order in the galaxy through technological superiority. We are the elder race, the advanced civilization that guides younger species. But humans represent something we never anticipated, which is a species that can leap beyond the established order not through slow advancement, but through radical innovation born of desperation and creativity." The dragon's voice carried a note of wonder. "You take impossible situations and make them possible through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the implications of what he was hearing. "So what you're saying is, I am saying that your species represents a fundamental challenge to the way the galaxy has operated for millennia. And there are those among my kind who would prefer to eliminate that challenge before it becomes a threat." The weight of the dragon's words settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. Everything the creature was telling him suggested that humanity was in danger on a scale he couldn't even comprehend. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "If your people want to keep this secret, why risk everything to warn one random human at a gas station?" The dragon straightened to its full height, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Because I have spent my life believing that knowledge belongs to all beings, not just to those with the power to control it. And because I have come to believe that the galaxy needs what humanity represents, even if my own species cannot see it." Marcus looked up at the magnificent creature, seeing it clearly for the first time, not as a monster or a fantasy, but as an individual who had sacrificed everything to do what it believed was right. "What happens now?" he asked. The dragon's eyes flicked toward the horizon, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to show. "Now, I must continue my journey before my pursuers arrive. But First, I must ask something of you. What? Will you help me deliver a message to your species leaders? Something that might save your world. Marcus thought about his ordinary life, his night shift job, his small apartment, his quiet existence. Everything the dragon was offering would change all of that forever. There would be no going back to normal after this. He looked up into those ancient, intelligent eyes and made his choice. Yeah, he said simply. I'll help. The dragon's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, if dragons could smile. Then, perhaps there is hope for both our species yet. The dragon led Marcus away from the gas station into a field behind the building, where the grass was tall enough to provide some cover. As they walked, the creature's massive form moved with surprising stealth, its footsteps barely disturbing the ground despite its size. Marcus found himself wondering how something so large could move so quietly. My name is Vaeltherin, the dragon said as they settled in a small depression surrounded by oak trees. I realize I should have introduced myself earlier, but circumstances have made me cautious about revealing personal details. Marcus Chun, he replied, still feeling surreal about having a conversation with the dragon. And I get the caution thing. If I were being hunted by my own people, I'd probably be paranoid too. Vaeltherin's great head tilted in that gesture Marcus was beginning to recognize as thoughtfulness. Paranoid suggests irrational fear. My concerns are entirely rational, I assure you. The dragon reached into the pouch around its neck and withdrew a small device that looked like it was carved from the same material as the gemstone it had offered earlier. When Vaeltherin activated it with a claw tip, it projected a three-dimensional hologram into the space between them. Marcus gasped. The hologram showed a map of the galaxy, but not like any he'd seen in science textbooks. This one was alive with moving dots of light, showing what he realized must be traffic patterns between star systems. Hundreds of thousands of ships moving along established routes, creating a vast network of commerce and communication. This is the current state of galactic civilization, Vaeltherin explained. 47 major species, countless minor ones, all connected through trade routes that have remained essentially unchanged for over 3,000 years. Marcus studied the map, noting how the routes seemed to flow towards certain central points. Who controls it all? The Elder Council, of which my species is a founding member. We maintain order through a combination of advanced technology and carefully managed information distribution. Younger species are guided along predetermined development paths to ensure they integrate smoothly into the existing order. Guided how? Vaeltherin's expression darkened slightly. Through selective revelation of technology, strategic placement of advisors, and, when necessary, direct intervention. Marcus felt a chill. Intervention. You mean like invasion? Rarely so crude. Usually it involves subtle manipulation of a species' development. Perhaps a key scientist dies in an accident, or a crucial discovery is delayed by equipment failures, or resources needed for advancement mysteriously become unavailable. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You're talking about controlling the development of entire civilizations. Controlling is a harsh term. We prefer to think of it as guidance. Left to their own devices, younger species often develop in ways that threaten galactic stability. Wars break out, resources are wasted, entire systems can be rendered uninhabitable through poor decision-making. And you think that gives you the right to play God? Vaeltherin's eyes flashed, but not with anger, with something that looked almost like pain. I once believed it did. The Elder Council has maintained peace across thousands of systems for millennia. The costs seemed justified by the results. What changed your mind? The hologram shifted, focusing on a small section near the edge of the galaxy. Marcus recognized the spiral arm that contained Earth's solar system. I was assigned to observe your species 27 of your years ago, Vaeltherin said quietly. A routine monitoring mission to ensure your development stayed within acceptable parameters. Marcus studied the dragon's expression. But something went wrong. Something went right, though I didn't understand it at the time. Vaeltherin manipulated the hologram, showing Earth in detail. Your species was developing faster than predicted. Much faster. The council became concerned. Concerned enough to intervene? The recommendation was for a Class 7 intervention. Selective elimination of key technological developments, introduction of social disruptions to slow progress, possible direct conflict to reduce population and industrial capacity. Marcus felt sick. You were planning to set back human civilization. Not I. But yes, that was the plan. I was to identify the most effective intervention points and report back to the council. Vaelthrin paused, staring at the hologram of Earth. But the more I observed your species, the more I realized that standard intervention protocols would not work. Why not? Because humans do not respond to setbacks the way other species do. The dragon's voice carried a note of wonder that reminded Marcus of a scientist describing a fascinating discovery. When faced with obstacles, most species either find technological solutions or accept defeat. Humans do something else entirely. Vaelthrin waved a claw, and the hologram changed to show historical scenes from Earth. Marcus recognized some of them. The Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk, the moon landing, what looked like the aftermath of various natural disasters. Every time your species encountered a seemingly impossible challenge, you found ways around it that defied conventional logic, Vaelthrin continued. When you wanted to fly, you didn't just study bird physiology like other species would. You created entirely new principles of aerodynamics. When you wanted to reach your moon, you didn't wait for anti-gravity technology. You strapped yourselves to controlled explosions and threw yourselves into space through pure mathematics and determination. Marcus found himself oddly proud, despite the circumstances. We're good at improvising. Improvising. Vaelthrin repeated the word like it was foreign. Yes, that's part of it. But it's more than that. You treat impossibility as a temporary condition rather than a permanent state. The hologram shifted again, showing what looked like disaster response scenarios. Marcus saw images of humans working together in the aftermath of earthquakes, floods, and other catastrophes. This is what convinced me that standard intervention would fail, Vaelthrin said. Your species' response to crisis is not despair or acceptance. It's innovation. The worse the situation becomes, the more creative your solutions become. So what did you report back to the council? Vaelthrin's silence stretched long enough that Marcus began to worry about the answer. I reported that humanity represented a unique case that required further study, the dragon finally said. I requested an extension to my observation period. And they agreed? They did. For 5 additional years. During which time, I continued observing, and your species continued exceeding every projection we had made. The hologram now showed more recent history. The International Space Station, the development of the Internet, the rapid advancement of computer technology. In those 5 years, you advanced technologically at a rate that typically takes other species decades to achieve. But, more importantly, you did it in ways that no one had anticipated. Your approach to problem-solving began appearing in patterns I had never seen before. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite the growing sense of danger. What kind of patterns? Émerge solution. Problem solved not by planned research, but by accidental discoveries combined with what you call thinking outside the box. Breakthroughs achieved by individuals working in completely unrelated fields who happened to make connections that specialists missed. Vaelthrin manipulated the hologram to show a complex web of interconnected discoveries. Your species' advancement is not linear like other civilizations. It's exponential and chaotic. You make leaps that skip entire stages of development. Is that bad? For maintaining the existing galactic order? It's catastrophic. Vaelthrin's eyes met Marcus's. For the future of intelligent life in the universe, it may be exactly what we need. Marcus felt a shift in the conversation's tone. What do you mean? The hologram expanded again, showing the galaxy in its entirety, but now Marcus could see something wrong with the picture. Large areas were dark, empty of the moving lights that indicated civilized activity. The current galactic order is failing, Vaelthrin said quietly. We have maintained stability for millennia, but at the cost of innovation. By controlling development, we have created a civilization that is advanced but static. We solve old problems efficiently, but struggle to address new challenges. What kind of new challenges? The galaxy is changing in ways we did not anticipate. Stars age, resources become scarce, and new threats emerge from outside our borders. We need solutions that transcend our existing knowledge, but our civilization is built on preserving established knowledge rather than creating new knowledge. The dark areas of the hologram pulsed ominously as Veilthrin spoke. These are systems lost to various crises over the past 1,000 years. Stellar collapse, resource depletion, conflicts with unknown entities from beyond our mapped space. In each case, our response was to apply existing solutions. When those failed, we abandoned the systems rather than risk the unknown. Marcus studied the map, noting how the dark areas seemed to be growing larger. How many people? Trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Veilthrin's voice carried the weight of personal responsibility. Lives lost because we were too rigid to adapt, too afraid of change to innovate. And you think humans could have saved them? I think humans would have tried things we never considered. Your species doesn't accept that some problems are unsolvable. You keep trying until you find an answer, even if that answer requires completely redefining the problem. The hologram shifted to show Earth again, but now Marcus could see projected lines extending from his home planet toward other star systems. These are the potential developments we project if your species is allowed to advance without interference, Veilthrin explained. Within a century, you could be providing solutions to challenges that have stymied galactic civilization for millennia. Marcus stared at the projection, feeling overwhelmed by the implications. And the Elder Council doesn't want that to happen. The Elder Council sees humanity as a threat to order rather than a solution to stagnation. They fear what will happen if a species like yours gains access to advanced technology without going through the traditional development process. What would happen? Unknown. And that uncertainty terrifies them more than the known failures of the current system. Veilthrin deactivated the hologram, leaving them in darkness lit only by the dragon's softly glowing scales. That's why they ordered a more aggressive intervention. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What kind of intervention? Class 9. Complete elimination of technological capability, reduction of population to pre-industrial levels, quarantine of your solar system to prevent future development. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. They're planning genocide. They're planning to preserve what they see as galactic stability by removing what they perceive as a destabilizing element. Veilthrin's voice was carefully neutral, but Marcus could hear the underlying emotion. The orders were issued 6 months ago. Why hasn't it happened yet? Because I have been providing false reports about your species' development, claiming that your advancement has slowed and that natural intervention appears to be occurring through your own social conflicts. Veilthrin's great head lowered, but that deception cannot last much longer. Eventually, they will send other observers to verify my reports. Is that who's chasing you? Other observers. Enforcement agents. They were sent when I failed to report for my scheduled return 3 months ago. Veilthrin's scales dimmed slightly. They know I've gone rogue. They will attempt to capture me alive if possible, to learn how much I have revealed about galactic civilization to unauthorized parties. Unauthorized parties meaning humans. Meaning you specifically. Veilthrin looked directly at Marcus. By sharing this information with you, I have committed what my people consider the highest form of treason. Marcus sat in stunned silence, processing everything he'd learned. In the space of a few hours, his understanding of reality had been completely shattered and rebuilt. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe, wasn't the most advanced species, and was apparently about to be erased by beings so powerful they could manipulate the development of entire civilizations. Why? He finally asked. Why risk everything to warn us? Veilthrin was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a sadness that seemed to echo through the centuries. Because I've spent my long life believing that knowledge and wisdom should be preserved and shared, not hoarded and controlled. Because I have seen what happens when fear of change becomes more important than the pursuit of truth. The dragon's eyes reflected the starlight. And because I have come to believe that the galaxy needs what humanity represents, even if it means the end of everything I once thought was right. Marcus looked up at the stars, knowing now that many of them harbored worlds full of intelligent life, all connected by a vast network of civilization that his own species didn't even know existed. Somewhere out there, powerful beings were deciding whether humanity deserved to continue existing. "What can we do?" he asked. "I mean, if these beings are so advanced, what chance do humans have?" Valefrin's expression shifted into something that might have been hope. That, the dragon said, is exactly the kind of thinking that makes your species unique. You didn't ask whether resistance was possible. You asked what could be done. Any other species would have accepted defeat and begun negotiating terms for survival. Is resistance possible? Unknown. But if any species could find a way to resist the Elder Council, it would be yours. Valefrin activated the hologram device again, but this time it showed technical specifications that made Marcus's head spin. The pursuit force following me consists of 3 enforcement vessels and approximately 50 agents. They are armed with weapons that can sterilize planets and technology that makes your most advanced systems look like primitive tools. Marcus studied the incomprehensible diagrams. So we're outgunned. Completely. But that has never stopped humans before. Valefrin's voice carried a note of excitement. You excel at asymmetric conflict. Your entire military history is filled with examples of weaker forces defeating stronger ones through tactics that no one anticipated. This isn't exactly a normal military situation. No, it's not. But the principles remain the same. The Elder Council's forces are designed to deal with conventional threats. They have protocols for dealing with established technologies and predictable responses. They do not have protocols for dealing with humans. Marcus felt a spark of hope, quickly followed by doubt. Even if we could somehow fight back, how would we even know they were coming? Valefrin's eyes glittered in the darkness. Because I'm going to help you prepare. And because you're going to do something that will change everything. What? You're going to contact your government and convince them to take my warning seriously. And then you're going to help me give humanity something it has never had before. Which is... The dragon's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. A chance to punch back. Marcus stared at the phone in his hand, wondering how exactly one went about calling the government to report an alien invasion. The yellow pages didn't have a listing for Extraterrestrial Threats Division, and 911 seemed inadequate for galactic-scale problems. Start with your military, Valefrin suggested, seeming to read his thoughts. They will be most likely to understand the implications of what I'm telling you. I can't just call the Pentagon and say, hey, there's a dragon in my cornfield who wants to talk about aliens. They'll hang up on me. Then, we must provide proof that cannot be dismissed. Valefrin reached into his pouch and withdrew several items that made Marcus's eyes widen. These should be sufficient to attract the appropriate attention. The first item was a small cube that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the gemstone, but this one pulsed with internal light in patterns that definitely weren't natural. The second looked like a piece of metal, but it moved like liquid while maintaining a solid shape. The third was something Marcus couldn't even begin to describe, except that looking at it made his eyes water and his brain insist that it was somehow the wrong shape. Technology samples, Valefrin explained. Each one represents capabilities far beyond your current understanding. Your scientists will recognize immediately that these could not have been created by human technology. Marcus picked up the cube, surprised by its weight. The thing felt dense as lead, but warm to the touch, and the light patterns inside shifted when he moved it. What does it do? That particular device is a portable fusion generator. It could power your entire city for approximately 300 years without refueling. Marcus nearly dropped the cube. This thing is a fusion reactor. A basic one, yes. The metallurgical sample contains programmable matter that can reshape itself into any tool or structure needed. The third item. Valefrin paused. The third item is more complex. Your language lacks words for what it does. Try anyway. It manipulates probability on a quantum level. In practical terms, it makes unlikely things more likely to happen. Marcus stared at the impossible object, trying to wrap his mind around what he'd just heard. You're talking about changing luck? Very crudely, yes. Though luck implies randomness. And what this device does is quite precise. Valethrin's expression grew serious. I'm giving you these not just as proof, but as tools. Your species will need every advantage it can get. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the morning silence. Marcus looked toward the highway and saw military trucks turning into the gas station parking lot, followed by unmarked vans and cars. How did they find us so fast? Marcus asked, his heart racing. They didn't find us, Valethrin said calmly. You called them. I haven't called anyone yet. You will. The dragon's eyes held that knowing look again. The probability device has been active since I removed it from my pouch. The likelihood of your government responding appropriately to this situation has been enhanced. Marcus stared at the dragon, then at the approaching vehicles. You rigged this. I ensured that the right people would be in the right place at the right time to hear what they needed to hear. Valethrin began moving toward the edge of the field. Now comes the truly difficult part. What's that? Convincing them not to shoot me. Marcus ran toward the gas station, clutching the alien devices. As he emerged from the field, he found himself facing a dozen military personnel with weapons drawn, all aimed at the tree line where Valethrin was presumably hiding. Drop the items and put your hands up, someone shouted. Wait, Marcus called back. I'm the one who called you. A woman in military fatigues stepped forward, her weapon lowered but ready. Mr. Chun, I am Kenel Sara Martinez. You reported contact with an extraterrestrial entity. Marcus blinked. He definitely hadn't made any such call. The probability device was apparently more effective than he'd imagined. Yes, he said, deciding to go with it. It's in the field behind the station. And before you start shooting, you should know it's friendly. Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the tree line and surrender any weapons or unknown devices, Colonel Martinez said, her voice professional but tense. These aren't weapons, Marcus said, holding up the alien technology. They're proof. This thing here could solve our energy crisis. This one could revolutionize manufacturing. And this one, he looked at the probability device. This one is why you're all here instead of dismissing my call as a prank. Colonel Martinez signaled to her team, and several soldiers moved to flank Marcus while keeping their weapons trained on the field. Sir, I need you to place those items on the ground and step back. Colonel, a new voice interrupted. A man in a suit approached from one of the unmarked cars, talking rapidly into a phone. We're reading energy signatures that are off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's not human technology. Dr. Reeves? Martinez looked to the suited man. The electromagnetic spectrum is lighting up like a Christmas tree, Dr. Reeves said, still staring at his instruments. And the gravitational readings, this is impossible. Whatever's generating these signatures is massive, but it's also somehow not affecting local gravity in a way that makes any sense. Valethrin's voice carried across the field, speaking in that tone that was felt as much as heard. I'm going to approach slowly, the dragon announced. I'm not armed, and I mean no harm to you or your world. The soldiers tensed as the massive form emerged from the trees. Even knowing what to expect, Marcus was struck again by the sheer presence of the creature. Valethrin moved with deliberate care, keeping his wings folded and his head lowered in a gesture that somehow managed to be non-threatening despite his size. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Hold fire, Colonel Martinez commanded, her voice sharp. Nobody shoots unless I give the order. Dr. Reeves stared at his instruments, then at the dragon, then back at his instruments. This is reading as a single organism, but the energy output, it's like a walking nuclear reactor. Valethrin stopped about 30 feet away from the assembled humans. I am Valethrin of the Third Spiral, he said formally. I seek an audience with representatives of your species' governing body. Colonel Martinez had her weapon trained on the dragon's head, but her hands were steady. You're under no authority I recognize. Identify your intentions on Earth. I came to warn you, Vailthrin replied simply. Your species is in danger from forces you're not aware of. I have defied my own people to bring you this warning. What kind of danger? Dr. Reeves asked, stepping forward despite the colonel's sharp look. The kind that ends civilizations, Vailthrin said. The kind that has already ended dozens of others. Marcus found his voice. Colonel, he's telling the truth. There's a whole galactic civilization out there, and they're planning to wipe us out because they see us as a threat. A threat to what? Martinez asked, never taking her eyes off Vailthrin. To their way of doing things, Marcus said. Apparently humans are too unpredictable for their liking. Dr. Reeves looked at the devices in Marcus's hands. May I examine those? Marcus looked to Vailthrin, who nodded slightly. Dr. Reeves approached cautiously, pulling out a scanner that immediately began beeping frantically when pointed at the alien technology. These materials don't exist, Dr. Reeves said after a moment. I mean, according to our understanding of physics, they can't exist. But here they are. Your understanding of physics is incomplete, Vailthrin said mildly, as is your understanding of your place in the galaxy. Colonel Martinez lowered her weapon slightly. Assuming you're telling the truth, why should we trust someone who admits to defying his own people? Because I am defying them to preserve something more valuable than loyalty to authority, Vailthrin replied. I'm defying them to preserve the future. What future? Vailthrin activated his hologram device again, projecting the galactic map into the space between them. Several soldiers stepped back in surprise, but Dr. Reeves moved closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming caution. Your species represents something unprecedented in galactic history, Vailthrin explained, highlighting various systems on the map. Every other intelligent species developed along predictable paths, following logical progressions from simple to complex technology. But humans, the map focused on Earth. Humans skip steps. You solve problems in ways that never occurred to anyone else. Give me an example, Colonel Martinez said. Your space program, Vailthrin said immediately. Most species develop anti-gravity technology before attempting to leave their homeworld. You strapped yourselves to controlled explosions and calculated your way into orbit through pure mathematics. It was brilliant, insane, and completely unprecedented. Dr. Reeves was staring at the hologram with obvious excitement. This is showing real-time data? Current as of 6 hours ago, Vailthrin confirmed. Those moving points are active spacecraft. The larger concentrations indicate major population centers. How many species are we talking about? Martinez asked. 47 major civilizations, hundreds of minor ones. All connected through trade routes and governed by a central authority called the Elder Council. Marcus watched the colonel's face as the implications sank in. Earth wasn't just not alone in the universe. It was surrounded by an enormous civilization that could apparently snuff them out without effort. And this Elder Council wants to eliminate humanity. Why exactly? Martinez asked. Because you're disruptive, Vailthrin said. Your approach to problem-solving doesn't fit the established patterns. You make connections that others miss, find solutions that others overlook, and, worst of all, you refuse to accept that some problems are unsolvable. That sounds like a good thing. It is. But it's also terrifying to a civilization built on the premise that there are correct ways to do things, and that those ways have already been discovered. The hologram shifted to show the approaching enforcement vessels. 3 dark shapes moving through space, still distant but clearly heading toward Earth. That's the force sent to intervene in your development, Vailthrin said. They will arrive in approximately 4 days. Dr. Reeves looked up from his scanner. What kind of weapons are we talking about? Planet killers, Vailthrin said bluntly, though they prefer more subtle methods. Electromagnetic pulse weapons that would destroy your electrical infrastructure, atmospheric processors that could alter your climate, targeted strikes against population centers disguised as natural disasters. Colonel Martinez was quiet for a long moment, studying the hologram. What's their standard procedure for intervention? Typically, they disable technological capability reduce population to manageable levels, and install monitoring stations to prevent future development beyond approved parameters. Genocide, Marcus said quietly. Managed reduction, Valethrin corrected. They would leave enough humans alive to maintain the species, but not enough to pose a threat. How many is enough? Martinez asked. Historically, between 50 and 100 million individuals distributed across multiple continents to prevent unified resistance. The number hit everyone like a physical blow. Colonel Martinez's weapon came back up, but she wasn't aiming it at Valethrin anymore. She was looking at the sky as if she could see the approaching ships. "What do you propose we do about it?" she asked. Valethrin's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "Fight back. Against weapons that can destroy planets? Against an enemy that has never faced an opponent like humanity," Valethrin countered. "Your species has a remarkable talent for turning disadvantages into advantages. You fight asymmetrically, adapt rapidly, and refuse to accept defeat even when logic says you should." Dr. Reeves looked up from the probability device he'd been examining. "This thing is actively altering quantum states," he said with barely controlled excitement. "It's actually changing the odds of things happening. One of many tools your species will need," Valethrin said. "But the real advantage you have is something that can't be given to you. It has to come from within." "Which is?" Marcus asked. "The absolute refusal to give up." Valethrin's ancient eyes held something that might have been hope. Other species fight until defeat becomes inevitable, then surrender to preserve what they can. Humans fight until victory becomes possible, then fight harder. Colonel Martinez lowered her weapon completely. "What do you need from us?" "Access to your military leadership, your scientists, and your world's governing bodies. Time to share everything I know about Elder Council technology and tactics. And most importantly," Valethrin paused, "permission to help you become something that can punch back at gods." The morning sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the gas station parking lot. Marcus looked around at the assembled soldiers and scientists, at the impossible alien technology in his hands, and at the dragon who had risked everything to give humanity a fighting chance. "So, where do we start?" Marcus asked. Valethrin's scales brightened noticeably. "We start by proving that the impossible is just another word for not yet accomplished." Colonel Martinez nodded grimly. "Then, let's get to work." The next 72 hours blurred together in a whirlwind of impossibility that Marcus would later think of as the moment humanity grew up all at once. The gas station had been transformed into something resembling a cross between a military command post and a science fiction movie set. Valethrin lay in the center of what had once been the parking lot, surrounded by hastily erected shelters containing the most advanced equipment Earth had to offer. The Dragon's own holographic displays flickered constantly, showing everything from galactic star charts to detailed technical specifications that made the world's brightest minds scratch their heads in confusion. Marcus found himself in the bizarre position of serving as an unofficial translator between Valethrin and the endless stream of military officers, scientists, and government officials who arrived hourly. Apparently, being the first human to make contact with a friendly alien gave him a certain authority that even generals respected. "The enforcement vessels are maintaining their approach vector," Valethrin announced, manipulating his holographic display to show the three dark shapes moving steadily toward Earth. "They will enter your solar system in 31 hours. General Harrison, who had arrived that morning as the senior military representative, studied the display with the grim expression of a man calculating impossible odds. "What's their usual protocol for this kind of operation?" "They will begin with long-range scanning to assess planetary defenses," Valethrin explained. "When they detect no significant military capability, they will move into orbital position and begin the intervention sequence, which involves selective electromagnetic pulse strikes to disable your electrical infrastructure, followed by atmospheric adjustments to create global climate disruption. Once your technological capability is neutralized, ground forces will land to oversee population reduction. Dr. Reeves looked up from where he'd been hunched over the alien technology for the past 3 days. His eyes were red with exhaustion, but his voice carried excitement that hadn't dimmed since he'd first seen Valethrin's devices. "General, we've made some progress with the technology samples," he said. "The fusion generator is beyond our current understanding, but we've figured out how to activate it safely. The programmable matter is even more interesting. It seems to respond to direct neural interface." "Meaning what exactly?" General Harrison asked. "Meaning you think about what you want it to become, and it reshapes itself accordingly," Dr. Reeves said, holding up a piece of the liquid metal that had formed itself into a perfect sphere. "We've managed to create basic tools, simple weapons, even electronic components. And the probability device?" Dr. Reeves glanced at Marcus, who had been helping coordinate the various research teams. "That one's been active almost constantly since Mr. Chun first touched it. We think it's been influencing events to ensure maximum human coordination and minimal panic." "You mean it's been rigging things in our favor?" General Harrison asked. "More like it's been making sure the right people are in the right places to make the right decisions," Marcus said. "Every call that's been made, every person who's shown up here, every breakthrough the science teams have had, none of it's been accidental." Valethrin nodded approvingly. "Your species has an intuitive understanding of probability manipulation that impresses me. Most species require extensive training to use such devices effectively." "Speaking of training," General Harrison said, "what can you tell us about combat tactics that might work against these enforcement vessels?" Valethrin's expression grew serious. "Conventional military tactics will be useless. Your weapons cannot penetrate their defenses, and their weapons can eliminate your forces from orbit. Direct confrontation will result in immediate defeat. Then, what do you suggest? Asymmetric engagement. Make them come to you on ground of your choosing. Force them to adapt to situations they haven't encountered before." Valethrin's eyes held that glitter of excitement again. "Use your species' greatest strength, which is unpredictability." Over the past 3 days, Marcus had watched humanity respond to the impossible with the kind of determination that Valethrin claimed made his species unique. Scientists worked around the clock to understand technology centuries ahead of Earth's capabilities. Military strategists developed plans to fight enemies with godlike power. World leaders put aside decades of political differences to coordinate a planetary defense. And somehow impossibly was working. The manufacturing plants in Detroit have successfully created programmable matter tools, Dr. Reeves reported. Crude ones, but functional. The fusion generators are being distributed to key military installations worldwide. And the probability devices. He paused. "We've managed to create simplified versions. Not as powerful as Valethrin's original, but effective enough to influence small-scale events." "How small-scale?" Marcus asked. "We've been using them to ensure favorable weather conditions at key locations, prevent equipment failures during critical tests, and improve coordination between different teams working on the same problems." General Harrison looked skeptical. "And you're certain these devices actually work?" "General," Dr. Reeves said with a tired smile, 3 days ago, the probability of this entire operation succeeding was essentially zero. The probability of world governments cooperating without panic or warfare was zero. The probability of our scientists making meaningful progress with completely alien technology in 72 hours was zero. Yet here we are. Valethrin had been unusually quiet during this exchange, but now he raised his massive head. "The enforcement vessels have begun their final approach sequence. They will be within your solar system in 12 hours. Are we ready?" General Harrison asked. "No," Valethrin said honestly. "You are not ready to face the Elder Council's technology in direct combat. But you are ready to do what your species does best, which is improvise brilliantly in impossible circumstances." The plan they had developed over the past 3 days was insane by any rational measure. It relied entirely on the Elder Council's forces responding predictably to an unprecedented situation, and on humanity's ability to adapt faster than their enemies could adjust. The enforcement vessels will enter orbit expecting to find a primitive world with no knowledge of galactic civilization. Vailthrin explained for what Marcus knew was the dozenth time. They will begin standard scanning procedures to assess your military capabilities. This is when we spring the first surprise. Dr. Reeves activated one of his jury-rigged probability devices. Instead of hiding our capabilities, we're going to advertise them. Every radar installation on Earth will be broadcasting modified signals that will read as advanced technology to their scanners. How advanced? General Harrison asked. Advanced enough to suggest that Earth has already made contact with galactic civilization and acquired defensive technology, Vailthrin said. This will force them to reconsider their approach. They'll call for reinforcements, Marcus pointed out. Eventually, yes. But first, they will attempt to identify the source of the technology. Standard protocol requires them to determine whether Earth has been contaminated by unauthorized contact before proceeding with intervention. Contaminated? Whether someone like me has already shared advanced technology with your species, Vailthrin explained. If they believe that has occurred, they must capture evidence before proceeding with cleansing operations. General Harrison nodded slowly. So they'll have to come down here to investigate. Correct. And when they do, Vailthrin's expression shifted into something that definitely looked like a predatory smile. They will discover that humans fight very differently than any species they have encountered before. The plan was multi-layered and completely dependent on timing. Earth's military forces have been repositioned to create the appearance of advanced defensive installations while actually serving as bait to draw the enforcement teams into ground engagement. Meanwhile, scientific teams equipped with programmable matter tools and probability devices would attempt to capture and reverse engineer enemy technology. It was audacious, risky, and had approximately 1,000 ways it could go catastrophically wrong. Marcus found himself loving every aspect of it. There's something I need to tell you all, Vailthrin said as the final preparations were being made. If this plan succeeds, if you manage to defeat or drive off the enforcement vessels, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? General Harrison asked. The Elder Council will learn that Earth represents a greater threat than they anticipated. They will respond accordingly. Meaning they will send a fleet large enough to sterilize your solar system from a safe distance, Vailthrin said bluntly. No ground forces, no investigation, no attempt to preserve your species. Complete elimination. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized what Vailthrin was saying. So if we fight back and win, they'll just send bigger guns? He asked. Yes. And if we don't fight back, they will reduce your population to manageable levels and install permanent monitoring to prevent future development. General Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Those are both pretty terrible options. Yes, Vailthrin agreed. But there's a third possibility, which is you could win so decisively, so completely, and so impossibly that the Elder Council is forced to reevaluate everything they believe about the nature of intelligent life in the galaxy. Marcus stared at the dragon. You're talking about somehow defeating an entire galactic civilization. I'm talking about doing something so unprecedented that they have no choice but to acknowledge that their approach to governing the galaxy is fundamentally flawed. Vailthrin's eyes held that look of ancient wisdom again. Your species has a gift for making the impossible look inevitable after the fact. Perhaps it's time to apply that gift on a galactic scale. Dr. Reeves looked up from his equipment with an expression that was part terror and part excitement. You're suggesting we overthrow the entire galactic order. I'm suggesting that your species represents evolution in action. The galaxy has been static for millennia because the Elder Council eliminated anything that challenged the established order. But they never encountered anything like humanity. What makes us so special? Marcus asked. You refuse to accept that anything is impossible, Vailthrin said simply. Every other species in the galaxy has limitations they accept as absolute. Humans treat limitations as temporary inconveniences. General Harrison activated his communication system, connecting to command centers around the world. All stations, this is Command Alpha. The packages are in motion. Execute Operation Impossible in T-minus 6 hours. As the countdown began, Marcus found himself thinking about the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. 3 days ago, he'd been a night shift worker at a gas station, worried about paying rent and wondering what to do with his life. Now, he was part of a plan to save humanity from extinction and potentially revolutionize galactic civilization. He had to admit, exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans seem to excel at turning into opportunities. Veilthrin, he said as the dragon prepared to take his position for the operation. What happens to you if this works? If this works, I will be declared a traitor to galactic civilization and hunted for the rest of my very long life. Veilthrin said matter-of-factly. But I will also be the being who helped introduce true innovation back into a stagnant galaxy. And if it doesn't work, then we will all share the same fate. The dragon scales brightened with what Marcus had learned was determination. But at least we will have tried something worthy of the attempt. Marcus looked around at the impossible scene. Human and alien technology working together, scientists and soldiers united in common cause, the entire world coordinating to face a threat from beyond the stars. You know what? He said with a grin that surprised him. I think we're going to pull this off. Veilthrin's rumbling laugh carried notes of hope and anticipation. Mr. Chun, I believe you may be right. The enforcement vessels appeared in Earth's sky like 3 dark stars that hadn't been there the night before. They maintained perfect formation as they approached, their massive hulls reflecting no light despite being clearly visible to every telescope pointed skyward. Marcus stood in the temporary command center that had been erected around Veilthrin, watching the holographic displays that showed the alien ship's steady approach. Around him, representatives from every major nation on Earth monitored communications channels, tracked military positions, and coordinated what was probably the most insane plan in human history. They're beginning scanning procedures, Veilthrin announced, his voice carrying easily over the controlled chaos of the command center. Now, at installations across the globe, modified radar and communication arrays began broadcasting the signals that Dr. Reeves and his teams had designed. To anyone monitoring Earth's electromagnetic spectrum, the planet would suddenly appear to be buzzing with advanced technology. The response was immediate. The 3 enforcement vessels altered their approach vector, slowing their descent and spreading out into a more cautious formation. It's working, Dr. Reeves said, monitoring the alien ship's energy signatures. They're switching to deep scan mode. They definitely noticed our fake technology signatures. General Harrison activated the global communication network. All teams, execute Phase 1. Make them think we're more dangerous than we are. Around the world, military installations began powering up equipment designed to look threatening while actually being harmless. Particle accelerators created energy signatures that would read as weapon charging cycles. Radio telescopes focused their output into narrow beams that mimicked targeting systems. Even civilian installations contributed, with power plants cycling their output to create the impression of massive energy weapons coming online. The effect on the enforcement vessels was exactly what Veilthrin had predicted. The ships moved into high orbital positions and began intensive scanning of the planet below, trying to identify the source of the unexpected technology. They're confused, Veilthrin reported, watching his instruments. Their scans are detecting energy signatures consistent with galactic-level technology, but they can't identify the specific systems. This is forcing them to follow contamination protocols. Which means what exactly? Marcus asked. They have to send ground teams to investigate before proceeding with cleansing operations, General Harrison explained. They can't risk destroying evidence of unauthorized technology transfer. The first landing craft detached from the enforcement vessels 12 hours later. Marcus watched through satellite feeds as 3 sleek ships descended toward predetermined locations. One in the Nevada desert, one in the Australian outback, and one in the Sahara. Each landing site had been carefully chosen for its isolation and for the strategic advantages it would provide to the defending forces. Ground teams are deploying, came the report from the Australian site. 12 individuals in powered armor, energy weapons, some kind of scanning equipment. They're heading directly for our fake installation. The fake installation was a masterpiece of misdirection, a collection of military vehicles and equipment arranged to look like a sophisticated base, complete with energy signatures generated by hidden fusion reactors and programmable matter devices. To alien scanners, it would appear to be exactly the kind of unauthorized technology transfer that the enforcement teams were looking for. Remember, General Harrison broadcast to all teams, let them get close to the bait before you spring the trap. We need them committed to ground engagement. Marcus found himself holding his breath as he watched satellite imagery of the alien soldiers approaching the decoy base. The beings moved with military precision, their powered armor making them look like metallic giants against the desert landscape. Their weapons were obviously advanced, crackling with energy that distorted the air around them. They're scanning the equipment now, came the report from Nevada. Moving into the installation perimeter. All teams, execute Phase 2, General Harrison ordered. What happened next was something the Elder Council's forces had never encountered in thousands of years of intervention operations. Instead of facing a primitive species trying to use stolen technology, they found themselves dealing with an enemy that had learned to use their own tactics against them. Hidden programmable matter devices, shaped to look like rocks and debris, suddenly activated and reformed themselves into capture nets. Probability devices, carefully positioned by human special forces, began influencing the odds of equipment failures and missed shots. Most importantly, human soldiers emerged from concealment using tactics that no galactic military manual had ever contemplated. The first alien soldier to fall was taken down not by superior firepower, but by a trap that would have made any Earth military engineer proud. A pit concealed by programmable matter and activated by a probability device that ensured the target would step in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. Target down in Australia, came the excited report. The armor's incredible, but the occupant is definitely biological. Humanoid, but with additional limbs and what look like cybernetic implants. Nevada team reports 2 targets captured alive, another voice announced. Their equipment is amazing, but they don't seem to know how to handle asymmetric warfare. The reports kept coming in, each one more encouraging than the last. The alien ground forces were technologically superior in every measurable way, but they had been trained to fight conventional enemies using conventional tactics. They had no experience dealing with humans. Sahara team has captured one of their scanning devices, Dr. Reeves announced, his voice tight with excitement. We're getting real-time technical specifications. Marcus watched the tactical displays as teams of human soldiers, equipped with alien-inspired technology and guided by probability devices, systematically outmaneuvered forces that should have been able to eliminate them without effort. It was working. Impossibly, insanely, it was actually working. The enforcement vessels are reacting, Valefrin reported, his attention focused on orbital displays. They're attempting to contact their ground teams. Are they getting through? No. Your electronic warfare teams are successfully jamming their communications using modified versions of their own protocols. Valefrin's eyes held something that looked like pride. They have no experience dealing with enemies who can adapt their own technology against them. What's their next move? Unknown. This situation is unprecedented in Elder Council history. They are likely consulting with their superiors before taking any action. That consultation took 6 hours, during which human forces consolidated their positions and scientists worked frantically to analyze captured alien technology. The technological windfall was extraordinary. Weapons that could punch through any known armor, sensors that could detect objects light years away, and communication devices that operated through quantum entanglement. But more important than the technology was what the captured equipment revealed about the Elder Council itself. These devices contain historical records, Dr. Reeves announced, his voice filled with wonder. Thousands of years of galactic history, records of every species the Elder Council has encountered, detailed files on intervention operations. What do they say about Earth? Marcus asked. That's the interesting part, Dr. Reeves said, pulling up holographic displays from the alien equipment. According to their records, Earth should have been classified for intervention centuries ago. Our technological development curve has been too rapid since the Renaissance. So why didn't they intervene sooner? Because every time they sent observers to evaluate us, something happened that convinced them we weren't ready for intervention yet. Natural disasters, wars, social conflicts, technological setbacks, things that made them think our development was being naturally delayed. Marcus looked at Vailthrin, who was studying the human analysis with obvious interest. You've been protecting us for centuries, haven't you? Not I personally, Vailthrin said carefully, but others of my kind who share my beliefs about the value of diversity in the galaxy. We have been influencing reports about your species for quite some time. How many others? More than the Elder Council suspects, but fewer than would be needed to change policy through official channels. Vailthrin's expression grew serious, which is why this operation must succeed completely. If we merely drive off this enforcement fleet, the next one will be too large to resist. The answer to their problem came from an unexpected source. Dr. Reeves, working with captured alien technology and a healthy dose of human ingenuity, made a discovery that changed everything. The enforcement vessels are connected to the Galactic Communication Network, he announced. All their sensor data, all their reports, everything they've observed since arriving at Earth is being automatically uploaded to Elder Council databases. Is that bad? Marcus asked. It's perfect, General Harrison said with a grin that reminded Marcus of a shark smelling blood. Because it means every alien in the galaxy is about to get a real-time demonstration of what humans can do when we're properly motivated. The plan for Phase 3 was even more audacious than everything that had come before. Instead of simply defeating the enforcement fleet, they're going to turn the aliens' own communication system into a broadcast platform for humanity. We're going to hack their entire network. Marcus asked. We're going to do something better, Dr. Reeves said, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement that had driven human innovation for millennia. We're going to show the entire galaxy what happens when you underestimate humans. Using captured alien technology, modified by human engineering, and enhanced with probability devices, Dr. Reeves and his teams created something that had never existed before, a virus designed not to destroy alien systems, but to ensure that every being in galactic civilization witnessed what happened next. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1, Dr. Reeves announced. Across the galaxy, every communication device, every data terminal, every holographic display suddenly showed the same image, Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel, with 3 massive enforcement vessels hovering in orbit above it. But they also showed something else. They showed human forces armed with improvised weapons and jury-rigged alien technology, systematically outfighting and outmaneuvering the most advanced military force in galactic civilization. More importantly, they showed humans doing something that no other species had ever done. They showed humans winning through pure, stubborn, impossible determination. The broadcast lasted for 6 hours, during which human forces completed their capture of the ground teams and turned captured alien weapons against the enforcement vessels themselves. By the time the transmission ended, the 3 massive ships were retreating toward the outer solar system, their crews unwilling to risk further engagement with an enemy that fought like no one they had ever encountered. But the real victory wasn't the tactical defeat of the enforcement fleet. The real victory was what happened next. We're receiving communications from across the galaxy, Vailthrin announced, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, all asking the same question, which is, how did you do that? The Galactic Communication Network, which had been rigidly controlled by the Elder Council for millennia, suddenly became a forum for open discussion. Species that had been guided along predetermined development paths for thousands of years began questioning why their advancement had been limited. Worlds that had accepted their place in the galactic order started asking why some species were allowed to develop freely while others were controlled. Most importantly, the demonstration of human capabilities sparked something that the Elder Council had spent millennia suppressing: innovation. They're sharing ideas, Dr. Reeves reported, monitoring the galactic networks. Technologies, philosophies, approaches to problem-solving that the Elder Council never allowed them to explore. It's like we've started a galactic renaissance. And the Elder Council? Marcus asked. In emergency session, Valethrin said with obvious satisfaction. For the first time in recorded history, they're facing organized questions about their authority from multiple species simultaneously. What does that mean for Earth? It means, Valethrin said, his ancient eyes holding a light that reminded Marcus of sunrise, that your species has done exactly what I hoped it would do, which was prove that the impossible is just another word for not yet accomplished. Marcus looked around the command center at the humans and alien technology working together, at the displays showing communication from across the galaxy, at the evidence that one small planet had somehow changed the course of galactic history. So what happens now? He asked. Valethrin stretched his massive wings, no longer the exhausted refugee who had stumbled into a gas station seeking fuel. Now, Mr. Chun, we find out what the galaxy looks like when innovation is allowed to flourish freely. And Earth? Earth becomes what it was always meant to be, the dragon said with absolute certainty. The place where impossible things happen every day. Marcus smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought him from a night shift job to the center of galactic revolution. It had been, he had to admit, exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans excelled at turning into opportunities. You know what? He said, watching the sun rise over a world that would never be the same. I think we're going to like this new galaxy. Valethrin's rumbling laugh carried the sound of possibilities being born. Mr. Chun, I believe the galaxy is going to like having humans in it. As reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy, describing a civilization awakening from millennia of stagnation, Marcus reflected on the strange chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A tired dragon stopping for fuel at a gas station had become the catalyst for the greatest change in galactic history. It was, he thought with satisfaction, exactly the kind of story that humans would tell for generations to come. The story of how the impossible became inevitable, one stubborn human decision at a time. The stars, which had seemed so distant just a few days ago, now felt like neighbors waiting to be met. And somewhere out there in the vast network of galactic civilization, billions of beings were learning what Earth had always known. That the only thing more dangerous than an impossible situation was a human being who refused to accept that it was impossible.